This is the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Podcast, Episode 22, Navigating the New Waters of Sustainably Sourced Grain Markets. I'm Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason. We're joined now by Megan Baskerville. She's with the Nature Conservancy, and I asked her to begin with just exactly what it is she does for TNC.
I'm in our ag program, so I help deliver a lot of our education and outreach around sustainable ag systems in Illinois. So that goes back to leading some trainings around soil health and conservation drainage, and then also working with our corporate partners to see how we can influence sustainable practices here in Illinois as well.
So you're working to try to create a sustainable supply chain for agriculture. What does that market look like?
Yeah, so we really do think that a sustainable food system is potentially the most significant way to ensure a future where both nature and people thrive. That really gets to TNC's mission writ large. And so what that looks like in Illinois or in supply chain systems is that every single part of the supply chain, every single stop that corn or soybean or product from the field to the table, those companies are engaged in making sure it was grown successfully, sustainably, it was shipped sustainably, and then it was processed sustainably as well.
What's the driving movement behind this?
Originally, it started with some corporate responsibility, and it really started in the factory, right, where there are ways that companies could use renewable or less energy in their processing. But soon, consumers started asking deeper questions and more probing questions. And when companies start to really look at their supply chain or look at the biggest uses of energy, they realize that it's not happening within the plant. It's really happening from when those raw products are being grown or sourced. And so that's really started the drive for companies to try to engage with that beginning part of the supply chain or the growers. So I would say it comes from both the corporate companies' own responsibilities and drive to be responsible socially and environmentally, and then also responding to that consumer pressure, which changes from wanting something that's raised sustainably to wanting something that uses as little packaging as possible. So consumer interests really do change month to month and year to year.
The Nature Conservancy is part of a consortium called the Illinois Sustainable Ag Partnership.
Yes.
What is it?
So it is just that, a partnership of like-minded organizations in Illinois that we got together, after the nutrient loss reduction strategy came about, and we realized that none of our individual organizations had the capacity or the reach to influence a lot of change. And we would do much better if we got together as a partnership. I think we've got 11 organizations now, and really align around messaging so that our producers and our ag advisors hear consistent messages and points from all of us as a cohort. And it just allows us to do work in a much more cohesive manner across Illinois and influence a lot more folks. We really are focused on providing practitioners lots of resources. So if you are an ag advisor or you advise growers in any way, whether you're a retailer or a conservation district staffer, the ISAP website has tons of resources. We have soil health specialists across the state. You can pick up a phone and call with any cover crop or no-till really nitty-gritty question. And then we also have very much more formal trainings, like I mentioned, our soil health training and conservation drainage trainings, which bring together cohorts of about 20 like-minded folks in a certain geography and really dive deep into the principles behind these things through a 18-month course or a 3-month course over the summer.
Megan Baskerville is with the Nature Conservancy. TNC is a member of the Illinois Sustainable Ag Partnership, and you may learn more about the programs she was discussing on the Illinois Sustainable Ag Partnership website. Just Google Illinois Sustainable Ag Partnership. You'll find it, and you can find the programs under the Programs tab. Illinois Extension is a partner along with PCM, that's Precision Conservation Management. Both are involved in the STAR program, and another organization, ADM, has been working with STAR and other programs to pull sustainability through the supply chain. Michelle French is manager of corporate sustainability at ADM. I asked her what her role is with the company.
So I have a degree in natural resources and environmental science from the University of Illinois. And I have been at ADM for about 8 years now. And I started off in the environmental group, where I did carbon accounting, basically trying to help the organization figure out the greenhouse gas footprint of all 800 facilities globally. And then when our corporate department was formed, so we formed a sustainability team about 2 or 3 years ago, hired our first chief sustainability officer, and when that office was created, I switched from the environmental group to the sustainability group.
Why is ADM interested in sustainably sourced grain?
The biggest reason that sustainably sourced grain is important to us at ADM is because if we don't have enough food or we don't have enough grain, we don't have a business. The global population projections they keep changing, but they're high. You know, anywhere from 9 billion, 10 billion people in 2050 to some of the higher estimates get up to maybe 11 billion people. And we're not growing any more land. We have a very finite amount of farmland. And especially in the US, as the population shifts and more farms are being sold or developed into subdivisions, we're having to produce more with less. If we don't have any grain, we don't have a business. And so it's in our best interest to make sure that we have a sustainably sourced supply so that we have a supply in the future.
Can you describe ADM's efforts on that front and what sustainable means?
Sure. Sustainable is kind of a funny term because it doesn't have one simple definition. And what we're finding is while we have the same principles behind sustainably sourced, we want to make sure that the grain is still available 50 years from now, 100 years from now. We want to make sure that we're actually improving the environment and the social aspect, the farmers' livelihoods, not just keeping them status quo, but actually improving where they are. So sometimes you'll hear regenerative ag, sometimes you'll hear sustainable sourcing, sometimes you hear conservation management. And to us, it's really all the same thing, making sure that we're going to have these commodities in the future. And so that looks very different depending on the geography, depending on the commodity. So we might focus heavily on deforestation, for example, when we're talking about soybeans coming from Brazil. And how do we ensure that these are being grown without cutting down any forests or encroaching on indigenous lands or anything like that? When we look at palm sourced from Malaysia, we're probably looking at sustainably sourced, focusing on deforestation, but also on human rights issues and making sure that there's no child labor in our supply chain. When we look in the US and we look at what really are the biggest principles of sustainable sourcing in the US, we're looking more at how do we ensure that we don't have excess nutrients running into the water? So really the nutrient reduction aspect. We're also looking at soil health. The ability of our soil to sequester carbon is amazing. The scientists are still trying to figure out just how to quantify the incredible storage capacity that we have in our soils. But the soils can't hold as much carbon if they're not healthy. So we're seeing this big effort towards soil health and the different practices that help to enable soil health. So ADM has been a member of Field to Market for quite a while. I'm actually on the board of directors for Field to Market, and we work with our growers as well as our customers, all coming together to set up different projects, and we focus on different things in different areas. We have some areas where we're sourcing wheat that are in irrigated areas, so more in kind of the breadbasket region through Nebraska and Kansas, where it's more likely to see irrigation. So in those areas, we're really focusing on water and making sure that the water is being used sensibly and as much as the plants need, but not overwatering, and then making sure that the water that is there is not being polluted, which again goes back to that nutrient reduction, nutrient runoff issue that we're focusing on. In some other areas, we're really focusing on soil health and trying to focus on reduced tillage, cover crops. What do we need to really rejuvenate that soil microbiome to get all the little microscopic organisms back to a healthy state that allows the plant to receive nutrients more efficiently, that enables the soil to sequester carbon through biological materials, just really kind of focusing on different specific things in different areas. But the best part is that most of those different things, while they may be a different focus, a lot of the farming practices are the same, really focusing on minimizing the soil disturbance. So whether that's, cutting 4 tillage passes down to 2, or going to no-till, or trying strip till, making sure that the land is covered when there isn't an active crop. So cover crops, whether that's a leguminous cover crop or some other grassy cover crop, just to make sure that that soil is covered. Again, with the no-till, leaving some of that residue in the field makes it more certain that your soil is going to stay put. And that gets into the financial and social aspect of this. So it's not just making sure that we have the crops, but we have to make sure that our farmers' livelihoods are being protected. Every bit of soil that runs into the river is just a valuable resource that's lost. Any of the nitrogen that ends up in the river is something that, that grower had to pay for. So we want to make sure that that doesn't end up anywhere but in the field, in the crops. So really also working and focusing on the productivity. If we can find different things that make the soil healthy, that increase yields, then again, that's the bottom line for the farmer to increase profitability.
How's ADM working with programs to that end, like STAR or Saving Tomorrow's Agricultural Resources, to achieve these goals?
Right. So STAR is a relatively new program, Saving Tomorrow's Agricultural Resources, like you mentioned. And what they are doing is they have simplified a response questionnaire. It's 14 questions, and the grower says the different practices that they are using. All of those go in. The science advisory panel has given point values to different practices. And so those points then will be totaled, and the grower receives a feedback rating between 1 and 5 stars, kind of letting them know where they are on the nexus of sustainable farming practices. And then alongside that rating is an opportunity, some different practices that they can try to improve their star rating. And so we are working with some of the soil and water conservation districts and with the Nature Conservancy, trying to assess where are we. So 2018 was our first year with the STAR program. And we kind of wanted to know, as a baseline, do we have mostly 2-star farmers or 5-star farmers? Where are we now, and where can we hope to get to? So now that we kind of have a baseline, and we were a little bit higher on the star rating than we thought, we were right around the 3 to 4-star average, which is fantastic. So now we can really start focusing on what programs are there, what different methods do we have, and we're starting to look at how can ADM and other supply chain partners work with the local groups, the local NGOs, with the Nature Conservancy, with the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, to help them set up their different RCPPs and maybe get some EQIP funding from USDA to help support growers. If they wanted to try cover crops, maybe there can be some cost share, or if they wanted to try grass waterways or some other edge of field practices or different sustainable farming techniques that qualify in the EQIP program, where any of these efforts and these programs that we're already doing, there could potentially be matching federal funds to really kind of get this over the finish line. Maybe it's advanced agronomic support. Maybe it's, just trying a practice that's never been tried before on someone's farm, but that they have seen a neighbor try and they really are curious about. So that's kind of the way we're seeing things shaping up. We're still in that very infant stage where at this point it's just been figuring out where we are and where we can go, but we're very excited to see where we can take this in the future.
I suspect farmers have been fairly receptive, or at least those you've talked to this point, because they're early adopters, most likely. How many acres or bushels have you sourced in this way around the state or the nation? And do you have an eventual target?
So we don't have a defined target yet. We have projects all over the country, and they range in size. So where we're doing STAR is in central Illinois. We currently have 350,000 acres enrolled. We also have a wheat project that is field to market. It's not STAR, but it is in the kind of breadbasket region. They go through Kansas and Nebraska, as far west as Colorado and as far east as Missouri. We have about 270,000 acres of wheat in that project. And then we have some projects that are kind of a mid-size. We have a cover crop project in Iowa that's focusing on soybeans and growing cover crops. We have some fairly small projects that are just focused on maybe a specialty crop like food grade corn, where we might only have 10,000 acres, but these are very specialized growers that only grow that crop for us and are really focused on getting the best variety of that food grade corn. That's something, rather than going into ethanol or corn syrup, that this corn would be straight to a food use, like corn flake cereal or something like that. So we do have some of those more specialty crops, and we do have just general corn, soy, and wheat. Altogether across the U.S. right now, we're sitting at about 750,000 acres, so 750,000. And we are continuing to work on increasing acres. We're always working with different supply chain partners. A lot of the consumer-facing product companies are interested in how they can get involved, so we're always happy to work with them, especially where the draw areas for sourcing commodities overlap with their goals and different regional targets.
How can farmers benefit from adopting these conservation practices?
The biggest thing is with agronomic support to figure out what practices work the best for their soil types and their geographies. There's a potential for the productivity gains and for cost reduction if you don't need as much crop input. So if you can reduce your pesticides and fertilizer needs, then that's a direct savings. There are other areas that are just really kind of in the infant stages on this that we're hoping to see really make a difference in the future. If we can show that soils that are healthier are more resilient, then we have some anecdotal evidence that growers who have been doing no-till and cover crops earlier this year in 2019, it was a pretty rough year. There were quite a few areas that had been flooded where growers just could not get into the fields. And we had some of the guys who had been doing no-till and cover crops who were able to get into their fields 3 weeks earlier than their neighbors, which is a pretty amazing thing when you're the only one able to get out in your field. So that's a huge benefit for the growers. We're also looking at if those soils are healthier and they're more able to weather these different climate events, then is there some way that they should be able to recognize that on the crop insurance side of things or on farm loans? So we're starting to see insurance companies and banks getting involved with STAR and trying to figure out what value they can provide as well to encourage the adoption of these different practices so that growers could potentially see yield increases. They could potentially see input reductions. They could potentially see cost savings in other areas as well.
Michelle French is a manager of corporate sustainability for ADM. As she closed out her comments, she was discussing the STAR program, Saving Tomorrow's Agricultural Resources. Greg Magsman is a farmer from Whiteheath, Illinois, and he's been assessing his operation via the STAR program. I caught up with him during the harvest season.
Well, my son and I farmed together. He just got out of college a few years ago and joined the operation, and we basically had been strictly corn soybean rotation, and I brought wheat into the rotation a few years ago, and kind of enjoyed having that, and so we're moving it into the rotation on all the ground that I own. So it'll all be in a 3-year rotation now. We started strip tilling 3 years ago, and then went to cover crop and did some no-till this past year, and that worked out fairly well. So I think we're gonna use that every year now.
Tell me a little bit about why you chose to participate in the STAR program. I think every field you have is a STAR field. Is that right?
Yeah, I entered all of them in, but some of them don't have a very high rating because part of our farms we're still farming conventionally, but the ground that I have control of, that I own or cash rent, then most of that is a higher STAR rating because we are using cover crops and no-till on those farms. And
how many years have you been in STAR?
3 years.
What benefits have you seen?
Well, I guess it's kind of helped me judge the job I'm doing, I guess, as far as being sustainable, and I'm very interested in improved soil health and cleaner water, and that's why we've gone to the cover crop and no-till system, I guess.
Any practices you changed after seeing your first STAR ratings the first year?
It's sort of like being back in school, I guess. One of my teachers grades my STAR papers, and so every time I get them back, I've got a bunch of red ink and comments on them, and so it's like being back in the classroom 40 years ago that I get to go over my test sheet and see where I need to improve.
Any conservation practices you added because of the STAR program?
Well, I think that was one of the reasons I brought wheat back into the rotation, because the wheat does count as a cover crop, and so then I'm getting that benefit of it being a cover crop and being a harvestable crop then. And so that was one of the reasons I brought wheat back in is because of that. It improved STAR rating, and I can use it as a cover crop, and then I'd just go ahead and double crop beans behind it then.
I suppose you're also intrigued by the ABCDs of the world, the ADMs, the Cargills, the Bungys, the Louis Dreyfuses, considering sustainability practices and how that works into their operations.
There's not very many people around here doing it. It's almost like a cult. Nobody will admit they do it for a while until you kind of tell them that you do it, and then you find out, oh yeah, I've been playing with that too. But we're trying to work through the process of how to use them and how to make it work, and hoping that we're going to gain some benefit by an increased market price from using it, and the STAR rating is that way that we can show that we are sustainable, and hopefully that some of these bigger companies will look at it and give us some credit for the effort we're making.
Greg Magsman is a farmer from Whiteheath, Illinois. You've been listening to the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Podcast. This episode is titled Navigating the New Waters of Sustainably Sourced Grain Markets. I'm Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason.